don't know how to turn mine off.
Okay, we are now recording. All right.
Okay, I hereby open the board, the Blackstone Board of Zoning Appeals, open on the 28th of March, 2022 for business.
I'm gonna go to the podium and I'll try to do my best to explain the request.
You mind if I say something first? I just came to thank everybody. Thank you for letting me serve up here, and I appreciate it.
Oh, is it, are you,
I'm out.
you're off?
So,
I got you.
yeah, they won't let me do that, but I just wanted to thank everybody and pleasure serving with everybody.
Did you make copies of this for everybody, Jen?
And again, if you need anything,
Thank
No, because it's for the planning
Good luck,
commission.
man.
No, we're talking about the parking for the same property today.
Okay.
But you got them for planning
I have
committee, that's all right.
copies, yeah. No,
I can hold it up.
No, but I've got copies if you need them.
The request is for the old town shop property, if you're familiar. I think it's 519 Church Street. It's a brick building, and there is a cinder block building, and actually, it looks like a Quonset hut almost. The request tonight before you is not whether apartments can go there. The request for you tonight is very similar to the ones that we've done in the past. He's doing one-bedroom apartments, and he would like to vary on some of the parking spaces from 2 to 1 per unit, since they are one bedroom. And I think we did this over on Lester Street. I think both of Mr. McCormick's developments, the one that's existing and the one that's under construction, also had a very similar request, and I think Patriot Square was requested, so I can think of right offhand 4 very similar ones. The one thing that I think the BZA has spoken is that if it's not a one-bedroom apartment, then it doesn't apply, that it has to be 2 parking spaces, okay? And so any kind of motions or anything like that, it would make sense to be specific to it that only one-bedroom apartments. If in the course of this, they decide, well, we wanna do some 2s, then they're gonna have to provide the 2 parking spaces for the 2 bedrooms, based on what has been approved in the past. Okay? You may or may not remember, I don't know if you were on camp, I don't know.
Yeah.
So you know, planning commission is gonna meet tonight, and right after you guys finish, what planning commission is considering tonight is the location of 30 apartments, up to 30 apartments, I think is what Dave's request actually said. It's kind of a weird thing by the zoning, that building is currently zoned business general, okay? Which allows retail, allows a restaurant, it allows a hotel by right,
We still talking about the same building,
same building.
Church Street.
Pardon?
We still talking about the Church
Yes,
Street
sir.
building,
519 Church Street.
Church Street. Now, how many
He could put
bedrooms, how many
hotel room.
bedrooms is gonna be putting in there total?
One bedroom apartments is what you're asking.
One
No,
bedroom.
how many units though?
27,
27 units?
yes ma'am, 27.
Now,
one
Dave's
bedroom.
request did say as many as 30.
Okay, well, I think we've identified as
Okay.
27 one beds,
Okay.
Okay.
27 one bedrooms.
yes ma'am.
Okay?
And he would be entitled to put a hotel in there, no problem. That's what the planning commission's gonna, but Dave doesn't want it to be described as a hotel. It may look like a hotel, may act like a hotel, it may quack like a hotel.
This is right there. No.
It's right,
Where
you
the
know where
water
gas pump
towers.
is out on Church Street?
Uh-huh.
Right across the street.
Yeah.
You know
It's
where
right
our
next to
water
the
is.
Farm Bureau.
Where the water tank.
Right, so it's being built, it's not built yet.
The buildings are there, but it hasn't been renovated in any way.
Okay.
The
It just
water
doesn't
tank.
seem like 27
That's
units
what I
could
know.
fit in there, but okay.
If you look at the property that we sold to Mr. McCormick, and he came to us originally because it was all zoned public open space. I'm getting a little off track, but I wanna make sure you guys understand why you're here tonight. This property was sold to Mr. McCormick by the town, not including the water tank. Was sold to Mr. McCormick, this survey was in 2016, so it was shortly thereafter, okay? And if you remember, the intention was to put a brewery in the building, okay? I think that's still part of the plan. But in addition, they would like the opportunity to put 27 single bedroom or one bedroom apartments in there as well. Now, there'd still be a brewery of sorts. I think it would be on a compressed scale from what we were expecting originally. But I guess Dave looked at his pro forma on, you know, his dollars and said, well, this makes more sense, or this makes the most sense per square foot. Okay? I don't think what he's doing is unprecedented with a one space for one bedroom, and if there are any 2s, you change it later on, you're gonna have to provide the spaces. But the request is to go from the 2
Mhm.
that are required to the 1, based on then all units being a 1-bedroom. And he has to provide them on site. However, I have an expectation when we sold this property to him, the town signed a lease with Mr. McCormick or Waukesha, whatever LLC it was, that he could use for parking. I don't know if you know, when we go down College,
Yeah.
going down that hill
Where they're doing the construction.
where they're tearing down the water tank, the upper part was approved for a lease for parking for the restaurant. Okay? It's my expectation that would continue to be the case, they would use those upper spaces, but irregardless, he's gotta find at a minimum 30 spaces here or on the adjacent side.
So what about overflow parking? I mean,
Yeah,
because
that's
that's the thing, I mean,
There may be
even
some
though
overflow.
you're saying
Mm-hmm.
1 per apartment, you still need overflow. People have company, they have guests staying, whatever the case may be. I understand the requirement for 1.
Mhm.
But I think even with the others that we've approved, there was some 1 and some 2.
There was what?
1 and 2 bedroom apartments and some additional maybe
I
overflow
think the
parking?
only ones that were 1 and 2 was down on Lester Street.
Okay,
And they have
that's probably
since
the one I.
started building houses and subdivided it for single family, so that dropped off. But they were curious about 1 and 2 bedroom, and if you remember, the variance specifically said, and they
Mhm.
offered in the meeting, oh, if we do any of these 2 bedrooms, it'll obviously
Right,
won't apply,
right.
okay? But Mr. McCormick's other projects, specifically I can think of, and Patriot Square, which is going down Route 40. You see that big blue building now that you can see coming from Pickett? If that building is,
We'll close
we have
on it, so.
electronic, those have the 1 bedroom,
Okay.
1 space.
Now, the parking across the street,
This is BZA
that
right
will
now.
not affect what's required of the building that he's working on.
Well, I think he can still use them for because it was agreed to by the town, that he could use them for the restaurant.
Okay.
The brewery and stuff that he does can be across the street. That was part of that lease originally. The lease has been extinguished because we sold the property to Mr. McCormick. But I think in the spirit of the transaction, the town had an expectation that that would be
Okay.
for the restaurant portion of it.
So
But
what,
on site,
I apologize.
but on site, I think he needs to find, at a minimum, if you approve it, the 30 spaces for the 30 units or 27 spaces for the 27 units.
We believe on the current site now at the building, there's enough to house with the 27 apartments and extra parking for the restaurant, and then also utilize the overflow on the side street. We believe that would work fine.
So you're saying
But the
on the
27
street?
have to be on site. You can't count on street unless specifically approved.
Okay,
If you remember, I don't know if you guys do, but on Lunenburg Avenue, Mr. McCormick's first building, that red,
Mm-hmm.
whatever, tobacco warehouse that used to be there, if you notice, he put in some on-street parking,
Mm-hmm.
but he put curb and gutter and cut, so I think he probably has 3 or 4 spaces at a minimum on street, but that was specifically permitted
okay.
for him to count those.
Right, and that was my next question, so 2730, whatever the 1 unit apartments, once the brewery is put in,
Mhm.
parking for those additional people,
Well, I
that would be,
think that's what's across the street.
Also,
but
there's
that was
enough,
approved for that building, but
For a
if,
restaurant brewery.
right, but if the apartments, so if the apartments are done and it's approved, where are you looking to put the parking for the units?
in our site plan, we have, if we do the 1-to-1, we have 27 1-bedroom apartments to be able to fit there on site, plus extra spaces, and then the overflow across on
Most of
the
it'll be
side
right
street.
here in front of the water tank.
Parking.
So you could
Here's
fit
the
the
water tank.
27 plus
Mhm.
parking for the brewery and overflow parking.
On the side street property, yes ma'am.
So what,
And you would see that when we submit the site plan.
okay, so if we were talking about just parking spaces, what would be your count for parking spaces overall?
Until I finish the site
Mhm.
plan, which we're working on, I
Mhm.
won't be able to answer that effectively.
Well, I think
Okay.
the residential, you know, is either gonna be
We've
2
covered
spaces or
that.
1 space.
Yeah,
Right, right, I get
we've
that.
For the
covered
commercial, it should be in this little chart right here. restaurants, and I assume that we're gonna call this a restaurant, it says 1 space per 100 square feet of floor area. So if you get 1,000 square foot space restaurant,
Mhm.
you can have 10 spaces. That's how it's broken down right there.
Okay. And do
So-
we know what the square footage of that is? I'm just curious.
It should be in, well, the planning commission packets have little.
I believe it's 2,000
diagrams that we can
less.
provide to you.
2,000, okay.
How come we're
I'll
not
put it out
getting specifics? Is it going to have the apartments and the brewery restaurant?
Mhm.
Or is it going to be apartments with a compressed brewery?
Mhm.
It looks like each time we talk about this particular property,
Mr.
things
Why don't we
seem
open
to
a public
change.
hearing, because we're supposed to be doing a public hearing. When we open it, then Mr. Haas can speak on it, and,
Yeah.
I think he's raising his hand. He has a-
Yeah.
Well, I can answer that question, or if you would like me to answer it now.
Why don't you open a public hearing, so
Okay,
we do it formally,
okay,
and then you come to the podium and
Sure.
do your thing.
okay. Then the board of zoning appeals is now open for public opinion and any questions.
You wanna come up here to the
Oh,
podium?
that would be fine, yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Christopher Haas. I am representing John David McCormick with Waukesha Inc. His property is the town garage, which is the property we're talking about. Should I just answer your question, sir? So the property right now is being developed on paper, in plans to be 27 one-bedroom apartments. There'll be a small restaurant there, owner occupied, but also with the option of perhaps leasing this to another restaurant that we have. We have a few people that are interested. We haven't inked any deals yet, but we could be the owner occupants of that, and it would most likely, if it's us, would be a brewery, but it would be in control with us. The 27 apartments would have 27 parking spaces for the tenants. We'll have additional parking on site for the restaurant, and then we have the overflow across the street
Okay, the overflow for what?
for extra parking for the restaurant.
For the restaurant?
Yes, ma'am.
So, there's gonna be 27 parking spaces for 27 units. And is there any
There is.
overflow on site
Yes, ma'am.
for the apartments, not the restaurant, but for residential? How, it just seems like it's gonna be, it's kind of a little bit confusing, like really a lot of mixing in there. Because in that area, all around that is a residential area. On that little side street going down off of Church Street, yeah, that's a little bit commercially with the farmers,
Farm Bureau.
your Farm Bureau and all of that there, but what I would not like to see is, yeah, street parking and stacking up in the neighborhoods, and, you know, we have an obligation to the people who are already there to keep their residential area residential, and the new project being self-contained. So, what I'm thinking is, even though it's one-bedroom apartments, it's gonna be some couples, and there's gonna be some people with 2 cars, and I would like to see some overflow parking for the units, not, you know, maybe not 27 more parking spaces, but like 1.5 parking spaces or something for the units. I'm just a little confused in what the setup is as far as, and have the overflow parking, the parking for the restaurant, maybe across the street or something. But something that's really a designated parking for the restaurant, parking for the units, that's not gonna overflow into the neighborhood.
So there's no intent to have any parking on street whatsoever at this time. And the lot that's across the street owned by John David is a very sizable lot where we have an option to do very, very big amounts of parking if need be. Presently, I'm the contractor building the new building there for him right now. And in the future, could be another building. It depends on how much parking lot takes land. So parking lots are really expensive. That's one of the reasons we want to get to a 1-to-1 so we can keep that demand for land for the future. So with all of this, what we would like to do is we're trying to get through the zoning today to identify that what we're doing is actually viable. So then when we invest in all these drawings, at that point, we're not wasting our time with our drawings because we know we have a buildable project. And then when we submit the drawings for the site, you'll see all of the overflow. You'll see the counts. You'll see
everything come together, and at that point, we're just down to approving and denying and working through that process.
And I can tell you, it will not take long if on-street parking becomes we may need to post those streets.
Yeah,
No,
I can see.
and we did it on Sixth Street, just so you know. Town council voted, because I think a lot of people were having trouble across the street from the nursing home. And parking in front of their home, so, if it comes down to that, that may be something the town council needs to do too, to make sure people aren't just parking in front of someone's house and all that.
Understood.
Because they only have on-street parking. I mean, you know, a couple
Most
people
of
may
them
have.
Part of the park right behind it, yeah, I think they do park on the street, there is an alley to the rear, but I don't know of any driveways that come off that alley, I don't think there are. Maybe
You mean for the housing?
up at Brunswick Avenue, that house that Ellen Conley used to own, may have an access from the side. Most of them come off Second Street, if not all.
And if we didn't have the property across the street, literally across the street from this project, I think we'd all have a big problem. But, you know, that's one of the reasons this has been pre-planned.
And so you know, it's just, whatever y'all decide tonight, it's non-negotiable. I mean, you've got to provide those parking spaces off-site. And town code says 1 space per 100 square feet, or based on that chart, he's gonna have to provide them. And, that portion of the building that's dedicated to the restaurant, say 10,000 square feet, he's gonna have to have, you know, an appropriate number of spaces to meet that. The request for you is, will you go from 2 to 1 on the one-bedroom apartments? That's the question. And tell me about the Farm Bureau property. Did you have some agreement cut with them or anything like that?
The Farm Bureau, is that where the Blackstone 2 is?
No, it's right across from this building.
Like the little farmer's market and
Just
the
sort of-
Not across
Oh,
Church Street, but
I
across-
don't know anything about that. I can't speak on behalf of that. But I think the big thing here is the site plan. When the site plan comes, if you just deny the site plan and you continue to, you know, have your own demands on what's important to you, we would just continue to rework that. Without the zoning, I don't even know if we have a project.
I will tell you this, that the project, if called a hotel, is legal today. As a hotel. But Mr. McCormick's asked that it be described and zoned as an apartment. So that's what the planning commission is gonna do. The business general district specifically allows hotels with a smaller parking requirement than 2, but for whatever reason, Mr. McCormick has decided he'd rather it be an apartment. Now, the good part about the apartment is you can't rent on a nightly basis.
That's
Can't do
correct.
that.
You cannot rent on a nightly basis.
That's
You gotta
correct.
rent for over a week.
Now, also, we built the first Blackstone short stay with the same type of criteria, and it's very successful. And it was like a hotel, but it's not really a hotel.
It looks like one, quack like one, walks like one, but the only difference we have in our ordinances between a hotel and a apartment is the specific number of days that you rent. And a hotel is less than 7 days. Can be as long as you want, I guess, but less than 7 days. So this would not be allowed to be rented out by the night, by 2 nights, 3 nights, that sort of thing. Whereas if chosen, if Mr. McCormick had said, I wanna make it a hotel, zoning would already be appropriate for it.
But knowing Mr. McCormick, I don't actually think he would do it, therefore the project wouldn't do it.
Yeah, he may,
But he's not a hotel owner, I just
but he
know this.
specifically said he didn't wanna consider this to be a hotel.
Correct.
It's just something about this particular project that's keeps me turning, because like I said earlier, each time we talk about this project, it seems to change, and I don't want later on that he get the apartment, he get the variance for the 1 parking space, and then in the end and in reality, he does something else.
I'd like to make a statement upon that. So far, John David has pretty much done everything that he's ever done in this town and in the other towns, which was worked out with the town, and he's got a really successful track record. The reason that it's been changing in the past is because the numbers don't work, and it's been working all the way to what we have now, and he has obviously made this work, and we're literally down to the last corner to actually figure this out and develop
In
it.
actuality, we haven't had any problem. His 2 developments, the one that's already existing, I believe is a 1 or 1.5
1.5.
per unit, because that was the first request. The one that was just approved where the water tank is, that's a 1. And I think, Patriot Square, it's either a 1 or 1.5, but it's also been buried on down. They had a lot of room at Patriot Square, a lot of square footage.
I like 1.5. Just because if it's a one-bedroom apartment, doesn't mean that just one person is living in it. And if it's a 2 adult working family, they may have 2 cars that they need to park. So just even with the overflow, I think if we already know 1.5, then it takes care of that need.
I'd like to make one more statement about 1.5 if I can.
Ask Mr. Chairman if he,
Oh, yes, if that's okay.
He had a
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yeah,
statement.
well, I mean, yeah, so when, say this thing's built, right? And then people are shopping it as a possible place to live, they're gonna be told, you have 1 parking space. So, with that in mind, if it's 2 people, but they are told before they rent it, that they've got 1 parking space, they're not gonna rent it and then use up 2 parking spaces. So they're gonna know that information beforehand. So only people, it's like 1 person who knows they have the 1 parking space to rent it. So, I mean, like you're saying, if it was 2 people sleeping in that bed, and they needed two cars, they would know that information before they rented the place, that you have 1 parking space. And so then they would go, okay, well, we'll look somewhere else.
Sure.
well, if I may, all these projects that we've seen constructed or under construction or approved, nearly all of them are not market rate apartments. These aren't intended for folks who live in Blackstone. These are intended for the most part for folks that work at BZA.
Pretty much. That's
What
correct.
these are intended for. And if you look at the rates for them, it's based on a per diem. And it's not based on a typical monthly rent, $800 or $700 or whatever the typical would be. These per diems are up to $96 a night. And that's gonna dictate who stays there. $96 a night, it's not gonna be a family. It's typically gonna be a student. I can't swear to it. I can't swear that it won't be, but my expectation is just like the rest of them. As the state came to us and said, we need 350 rooms a night, State Department came to us and said, we need 350 rooms. We're approaching 350, but we're still not there, even with a project like this, we're still not there. For the most part, these students, for the most part, either don't have a vehicle or they have just one vehicle. Now, I do know somebody that rented one of those rooms, so I won't tell you that it's only Fast C. The new county administrator, I think, was living in the first Nottaway house project on 2nd Street. If you look at the parking lot there, space-wise, they're not stretched for parking spaces. There's plenty available, but I don't know if you're prepared or I'm prepared to say definitively it will only be, but I think the market is intended for the folks that work at it. That's driving the demand.
Unfortunately.
It just
Okay.
is.
And we have the building, the first short stay that we've done, and that's kind of the same parameters, and that stays very full. It's a very successful project. That's why we're also building Blackstone 2, and then depending upon how much parking lot takes over the land, we could be able to even have a 3rd development if we have the ability to do that. That's why we're pushing as hard as we can for the 1-1, because we actually have historic data that it works. 2, we keep the cost down. 3, we keep the land open. For 4, another renovation or a new development later.
We just don't have many people coming to the town that are requesting zoning or rezoning or approval for projects that are market projects. We have one tonight, that's multi-bedroom, but they're on small scale, this is 80 units. And we have another one that's proposed on East 4th Street or been approved on East 4th Street for 5 units. So there's smaller ones that are market property, the big ones like ViewMac, the bigger projects like Nottaway House, Patriot Square, those are per diem rated. And if you took the number of days in the per diem, it's a whole lot more than what somebody would pay in the market.
Do we have any more public opinion, public questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I understand that, As far as the project itself and being self-contained and the parking serves the project and it's enough and it's sufficient. But you're also gonna have the brewery there that's drawing other people in who may not, stay there or anything. And that's my concern for the neighborhood all around. I know that we've done approved some other things without the full parking requirement. And I just have a concern for Blackstone overall as far as, are we gonna suddenly find ourselves with everything overflowing out into the street, overflowing out into the neighborhood? And for this project, where it's situated, great location, beautiful and everything, but it is all residential around there. And I can imagine a time where it's coming to where people are coming home and someone's parked in front of their house or behind their house in the alleyway or something. So that's why I really want to be sure that we are not creating a problem for people who are already there, that it's gonna remain residential, they're gonna be able to have their children there and have things nice, and they're not gonna come out there and find someone disoriented or whatever and in their yard, that kind of thing. I
Understood.
do have a great concern for that, so.
I think that would come down to site plan approval.
Well, I think council approved the zoning some time ago for the brewery and the restaurant, that sort of thing, so, I think this is a less, personally, I think it's a less obnoxious situation than necessarily a hotel. I think a hotel with a by the night kind of thing makes a difference. However, if you look at UMAC, that's a hotel. That is zoned for hotel, because they also wanted to include restaurants and many other types of things. The conditional use permit that's being considered tonight is only required if they have description as an apartment rather than a hotel. That makes a decision, but if you look at your chart, and it says your parking chart, and we go back to hotel room. Lodging rooms or boarding houses. Lodging, I assume is the closest we have by description in our ordinance. And it's the same, if you go down to motels, hotels, tourist homes, it's one parking space per unit. So I think he's asking for the same consideration on the parking as he would get at a hotel. However, he is requested it not be a hotel, but an apartment. And, for whatever reason, and I think it works for our benefit that you don't have nightly rentals and that sort of thing. Okay. Alright. But a hotel, motel, tourist room, lodging house, all the different descriptions would require one room per unit, or one parking space per unit.
Do we have any more public opinion, any more questions?
Not to mention the apartments that we're building are actually small, like the ones we just built. They're not really giant and sizable for family type people with children, and they're very, very compact.
It's like the efficiencies, right?
It's so
everything is one room, right?
Yeah, the refrigerators are small refrigerators. Everything is very compact, very tight. And it's really great for what we're trying to do here. So it's important that we consider that, because if they're very spacious, people would be showing up with families and such, and that's not what we're doing.
It's like a college dorm room.
Very much so, but very stylistic.
And I will tell you, talking to FASC on being a dead horse, but when FASC came to us and we said, well, we've got many people that want to build hotel rooms, what do they need to look like? They said, we don't tell you. You build what you think you gotta have, or what you have to have, but there are certain things that are non-negotiable. You have to have, a bathroom that's individual, it can't be shared between rooms, those kinds of things. And that's why UMAC had to do such a massive renovation, because a lot of the rooms there shared a bathroom. FASC in gov rooms, you may run in those circles, I've never dealt with it before, but apparently there's a process by which you get it inspected and certain standards and conditions and that sort of thing. But they didn't have a square footage requirement, they wanted a bed, an individual bathroom. I can't even say they were looking for a food prep area. That wasn't something that they said they had to have. Most hotel rooms, and I've been and have a little refrigerator and put little wine bottles and stuff in there. But they didn't have a specific square footage requirement that they told us. They wanted a desk where people could study. I think they also, because many of the agents will have firearms, they wanted to have secure safes in the room, okay, and bolted to the floor or bolted to the wall, but not a portable type safe. So by making it smaller, I mean, he's got to determine whether that works in the market. Because you got competition now, there's a lot of it in Blackstone now.
Is there any accessibility requirement for the handicap?
Yeah, that'll be in the site plan, that a certain number of those parking spaces have to be handicapped. I couldn't recite to you by verse how many have to be, but it's a certain number of spaces per unit. And that,
Parking and all that?
that will have to be included in the building, unless I'm gonna be surprised. Now, there are some historic buildings that don't have to meet certain ADA requirements because they're historic, and the modification of those buildings may take them out of it, but a new construction does have to have handicap. These are existing buildings. I don't know if Dave's planning on using a,
We have,
credit for them.
we have.
But there may be some accommodations as far as the number of rooms being handicap accessible or not handicap accessible. New stuff, yes, I think that's definitive, but these are older buildings. And we learned our lesson with, what used to be Sullivan's. Anybody been around here long enough to see those stairs? Man, it's like a good way to go flying down those rascals. And many people asked us, after the restaurant closed, do we have to put a, elevator in? And the response from the county building official was no, because of the historic nature of the property. And same thing at Academy Square, if you're familiar with the old, Clay's Restaurant on Lunenburg Avenue. When that was renovated, or it's still in the process of being renovated, the building official acquiesced that it did not have to have all handicapped rooms. I think they do have some, but the entire first floor is not handicapped. There may be an elevator going upstairs, I wouldn't say, but there were accommodations that the developer was able to use because it was a historic structure. And ViewMac, probably the same, but there's already an elevator in ViewMac now. Thanks for taking that.
So which property are you talking about right now?
The property that we're discussing is the Old Town Garage, which is out on Church Street.
And there were 2 meetings tonight, we're still in the first meeting,
Yes.
Board of Zoning Appeals.
That's out at 519 Church Street, if you're familiar,
Yeah.
water tank there, and cardboard recycling is there. The request of their Board of Zoning Appeals is hearing tonight is a variance from 2 spaces per unit to 1 space per unit on the residential side of things. And then planning commission will also consider that tonight as a conditional use permit.
So do we have any more public opinion? Hereby close public opinion sector. I will entertain a motion.
I move to close.
Pardon?
Are you asking for a motion?
No, not you. This is the actual
Oh.
board members that are meeting.
I'm here to help.
Nice.
You're here to speed it along, aren't you?
That's awesome.
I make a motion that we approve it, but with the 1.5.
Is there a second to
Second.
1.5?
Then vote probably second that the request be for 1.5 parking spaces for the property on 519 Church Street, Blackstone. Ready for a second?
She's
Properly moved to second. Oh, I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Okay, moved properly second. That we have 1.5 for the apartment request on 519 Church Street property.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Yep. Wait a minute, there's a question. Did you
Can
have a
I ask for clarification on that just a second? Is the 1.5 on site,
Yes.
On site.
only on site? You cannot use anything across the street for
Well,
that?
across the street has already been approved by the town council when they sold the property for the brewery restaurant portion of it. But the on-site needs to be on-site, on the property, without some special consideration or.
Can I say one statement before you just lock this 1.5 in? Do you guys know how big that overflow land is that we're using as overflow? Because if in your mind you think it's very small, you'll easily say 1.5. But if I brought you over there to a field of dreams, you would say 1.1, and then you would just come to me on my site plan and say, hey, we need you to move this around, add this, push this around a little bit more. But if it's really small, we would say 1.5. I just wanted to make that statement, because it's very, very large.
It's a couple, 3 acres where you're building, if anybody here is familiar, and those of you may not be here for this particular request,
And I,
piece of property that there's a
What's 3 acres?
apartment, it's across the street.
it's across the street in the overflow.
Industrial, like,
It's very,
Behind Farm Bureau,
it's
where
very,
this is next to Farm Bureau.
it's
But
very,
those parking spaces are gonna be for that building.
No,
There's
sir.
41 parking spaces that are already approved by
Yes.
BZA for 40 apartment units over there, okay? And, he still probably has 40% of the property there, where the water tank was, the apartment. You can look at a hole and see where the apartments are going, right in that hole
I'm
now.
thinking the overflow is gonna be right there on that street.
no,
Should be-
it'll be in that land.
It should be not on the street, it'll be on a College Road or College
Yeah,
Avenue side.
College Avenue, right there on the right, going down on the right, that's the overflow.
If you guys remember, there was also, when the zoning was done, there was also an increased setback on the College Road side of 50 feet. The parking lot can be within the required setback. So there's additional setbacks on the structure, buildings, apartments, hotels, or anything, can be within 50 feet of College Road right of way. Not necessarily the pavement, but the right of way itself.
That's the overflow on College Avenue. But we talking about the 27
On site.
on site, and that's gonna be, if you're facing that building from Church Street, gonna be to the left of the building, the building here and the water tower here. 27 spaces gonna get in there?
Yes?
He's not talking about the side of the street where the water tower is.
The garage area, right there.
Where the water tank is.
The water tank,
Anybody wants to look
if you
real quick?
facing 519 Church Street, with Church Street to your back,
Mhm.
to the left of that building, water tower's gonna be to the left also, but the building's gonna be here.
And the buildings are here.
Yeah, so 27 spaces gonna be from the, cardboard recycle area to the water tank?
All the way
No,
around.
No. From the side of that building, which is shown right here, this is the cardboard recycling area. It's all this property on Church Street. He actually owns all that
Across the
frontage.
street where the
We may be
trucks
cutting the
used to
grass, but
park.
they own.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
okay.
across that street right now, we're building a building with 40 apartments that already has approved site, and there's enough to build another 40 apartments with another site and still have the overflow to make you happy. It's a massive field directly across the street from this building.
It's an entire block.
It's a rock's throw.
This is where the 27, if it's 27 or if it's 39 or whatever the final configuration is, that's where they would intend on putting it. Not to say there couldn't be some around the building. I think there's some areas, maybe even on the college side, there's an old cinder block wall that's kind of fallen down. I would anticipate we took a bunch of underground storage tanks out right there. That could be parking. That's on site too, if they chose to do it.
Last statement, the reason we chose 27 apartments is because we've actually done the math to know that this will work on the campus where the building will be with the 27 units, additional parking for the brewery, and then the overflow that's a massive field. If it wasn't working on paper, I would then tell you only have 18 apartments, which I wouldn't be here today because the project would be not viable.
The apartment units have to have on-site parking. Whatever that number is it 2, is it 1.5, is it 1, it's gotta be on the site. Okay?
So across the street is considered on-site.
Well, the only reason that across the street applies is because the town council, when they sold the property to Mr. McCormick, the town sold the town shop for a restaurant slash brewery. The town agreed that they could use that across the street as overflow or parking for the restaurant.
But that's not on site, correct?
It's not on site. Council
Okay.
had agreed that they
Okay.
didn't have to be on site for the parking for the restaurant.
But we're talking about the units.
The units, they
And
have to be
then-
on site
and
because there's
so-
no additional consideration.
When we're talking about whether it's 27 or 1.5, which gets you to like right at 3940.
Right.
What is the maximum parking spaces that you possibly could put on site with the units?
Probably about 40, 45. So if you do the 1-1, it gives everybody a place to park. and then it gives about 10 or 12, maybe even 15 spaces
For the brewery.
for the brewery. Then you walk across the street and you can park probably 60 cars if that's what you want when we submit the site plan. And they would just walk across the street.
Across Church Street?
Yes.
So,
That
so,
dark-
but,
Dark, scary Church Street?
Well, no, not Church Street. College Ave, sorry.
okay. So my issue is, if there are 40 spaces, what's the issue with our request? Anybody else that's coming for the brewery or the restaurant or any of that, where they park and where you designate that, that's not our business. But for the zoning committee, we're requesting 1.5, which would get you to your 40, and you have the 40. So then there should not, I don't see an issue, but, I mean, you can tell me if that is an issue.
Well, then there'll be no parking at all on site for the restaurant whatsoever.
But y'all are already under the assumption that it's only gonna be one person with one car, so therefore you do have parking. It's gonna be available parking.
Yes, there is some available parking,
Okay.
but
Good point.
there's a good point there, but what we want to do is by submitting the site plan, we can actually look at this at length and decide if you are denying it and need more here, or approving this, but without the zoning, it might not even work. That's all I'm stating there today.
Now, and I understand what you're saying, but if there are 40 parking spots.
I can't
there-
say it's actually
No,
40,
no,
because we don't,
But if it's
yes.
39, and if we're close, and we're 1.5, 1.4, I mean.
But if it's
so-
36, does anybody have any place to park at the restaurant? Like any human being at all is the kind of the battle. And so we're trying to get that worked out in the site plan, because if you continue to deny the site plan, we have a problem.
I just feel like you're not really building these units for locals. You're building them for the State Department. And so with that being said, they either don't have a car or they have one car. So I don't feel like you would probably have an issue as far as your restaurant and all of that is concerned. Our request would be honored, and you would still have parking spaces for people that want to come to the restaurant. But if somebody did have two cars, then they do have the spaces.
All I can say is there's something really more powerful than anything that we have is the historic data that we
Right.
have. And we've already built buildings with 1.1, filled the building up in its full capacity every single day of our lives. And they're very, very small units and very, very compact. We're using that model here and trying to provide a restaurant to the town.
Motion and a second on the floor.
Will the parking be like designated?
Yeah,
Will they
that's
be
what I was
like
gonna
numbered
ask.
for the apartments?
It can totally be all this.
But then if the restaurant people are there, they could not use those that are,
Absolutely correct.
But they could also not be designated,
They can-
and then it would be open if they're open.
One last statement. If we didn't have the parking lot across the street, we wouldn't be here talking tonight.
That is a true statement. It would be too tight to do all those things. yeah.
Absolutely. And we want to continue to develop here in this town. We want to build another building there on that same lot that we're building right now.
Like I said earlier, there's something about that particular project that's eating at me. And right now, it's still eating at me because I keep hearing you say on-site, and then the next thing is across the street.
Not for the consideration of the request tonight.
But the request tonight is for parking for 27
One
Those
bedroom unit.
one
definitively-
bedroom units.
Those definitively have to be on that site.
Correct.
They have to be.
And they are.
The restaurant, the council, when they sold the property, they had an agreement, and it was actually a lease agreement, that when the restaurant opens, that they could use that property for the restaurant parking.
What is that 1.5 for those 27 units going to be on site?
Yes. Definitively. Without,
But he doesn't want 1.5, he wants 1.1. That's what he,
Okay.
or 1.0. So yes, it has to be on site, whether you say it's 40 or 39 or 27, these gotta be by.
It'll be 40
The only reason that the
40
restaurant
spaces.
is able to operate with parking off-site is because council specifically said you could. And that, probably in 2016 or 2017, when the property was actually sold.
5 years ago.
It's been sold.
I mean, and I understand the consideration and wanting to build and continue to do business here, but I think we just can't keep on doing the one-to-one. I mean, because the thing is, State Department is there, but our consideration has to be for this area. If somebody that does live here and can afford that apartment, why should they be denied it and only have the 1 point space? So I stay with the 1.5.
With 1.5, that's 13 spaces, approximately 13 spaces
Be about 40
overflow.
spaces. You can't split them in half, so it'd be 40 spaces.
Yeah. So it'd be 40 spaces or 13 overflow. Because I'm kind of a little bit puzzled in my mind of, okay, you have 27 units, you know you gotta have at least 27 spaces. If we did the 1.5 that came out to 40 spaces, like Jennifer said, are you designating, is it gonna be designated, and then the 13 spaces that are left over, they're either or?
Yes, they would be either
Okay,
or,
I see.
100%. We're not trying to take away people from coming to the building. However, if somebody shows up to that building and says, well, this building isn't for me, there's plenty of other buildings that are. There's one right around the corner, the Plantation Tobacco that we have, the big red building that's perfect. You have variety in this town. We're just trying to build another model that works really well. And have the restaurant. And if the brewery/restaurant, the brewery was the problem, you could work that out with the owner if you didn't want the brewery. Breweries seem to be great places to combine with residential as well. We have one down in Petersburg, it works great.
And if it was a hotel, it'd be convenient for people to spend the night at the brewery if they get too drunk.
But if it was a hotel, we wouldn't be here because we don't build hotels. 500 and 600 square feet is really hard to live with a few people in it. You get about 3 rooms and a bathroom and you go home. That's a model for half of America. The other half needs a little bit more room.
Would you like me to put your phone on vibrate?
I did turn ringer down.
So the motion's on the floor for 1.5.
And it's the second?
And it's
It's been seconded.
been seconded. So the motion carried.
You gotta vote on it.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's all the business we have.
No, you have one more thing for him.
Is that all for me?
No, you got
You
planning
got planning
commission.
commission too.
Okay, that's fine.
Get those.
Shall I take a seat or stay here? Yes, sir, thank you very much.
If you know or do not know, the town of Blackstone applied for and received about a $450,000 grant to build workforce housing. One of the things, the housing pieces, I think the market is stepping up for Fast C demands. I think somebody's building $350,000 homes on College Road. The one thing that we're finding, and the town has built probably 20 houses over the past 4 or 5 years, or renovated 20 houses over the past 4 or 5 years in several parts of town using Department of Housing and Community Development block grant, which is really HUD money. If you go over on the east end of town, you look at the houses, and they're pretty obvious which one by model and by style the town's done. One of the things that we did not feel that we have is enough inventory of the $120,000 homes that are more affordable for workforce housing. So there was a call put out by the Commonwealth Regional Council for applications. Habitat Humanity received $1 million grant. We received $450,000, and I think there was one other agency that received some money. One of the things that we want to do is get started on them, build some houses, and sell them. These will actually be sold through our partners at Southside Outreach to qualified individuals who may be a police officer, or they may be a nurse, or they may be a school teacher, but somebody that's not making enough to pay off maybe a mortgage of $350,000. Okay? We have 3 properties currently in the town's inventory, and the those of you that may or may not know, we work closely with a group called Southside Outreach out of South Boston. They do a lot of the housing surveys, they do the qualifications, they do a lot of the inspections. And they own one piece of property in town solely. The town owns one piece of property solely at the old Levi Strauss building, where there used to be a playground. That predates me, Frankie, you may be old enough to remember a playground over there, or Tommy. It's been around long enough, but the town owns property in there. I still would have to have it surveyed, but I have had a title search, and Tessie says the town owns property over there.
Oh, wow.
At the intersection of Dillard Street and Fitzgerald Street, kind of a steep drop off. We also own a 50% share of a piece of property at the very end of Broad Street. If you remember, there was a really bad looking old 2-story blue house, and we tore it down, and we actually bought the property from the guy that had owned it. We put up half the money, and Southside Outreach put up half the money. One of the houses would definitively go there, okay? The Southside Outreach bought what you see shaded on Broad Street, at the intersection of Hurt and Broad. Okay. I don't have a public hearing scheduled tonight, but I would like to gauge the interest of the committee, or the Board of Zoning Appeals before I did this, to see, and the public obviously would be notified, to split that lot in half. It would not meet, neither of the resulting lots would not be as large as what the code currently requires. But it would allow us to put 2 houses there, rather than 1 house, 1 workforce housing. Typically, in that zoning district, a lot needs to be 10,000 square feet, which is actually a little less than a quarter acre, okay? Now, if I do my math, these are 80 by 190,
So you'd have 45.
80 by 190. Right now, it's 15,000 square feet, so if split evenly, it'd be about 7,500 square foot per lot. 7,500, 7,600. 75 and 100. Yeah, 7,600. Okay. I'm asking if that flies in the face of what you guys would like to do, but this is a program to create home ownership. We have a lot of people that rent in Blackstone, and again, we've been successful with the application. We received a $450,000 grant to build 3 workforce homes, which I assume would be in the $120,000 range, maybe a little less. Okay.
Would this open a can of worms for others wanting the same?
But it's a precedent
consideration?
for sure, but I will tell you, you guys have been dealing with lots that are 50 feet wide, that are a whole lot smaller. It's just that these lots were divided much later than those lots over on College or 2nd Street. Those were divided in the 1800s. You know, 25-foot wide little postage stamps, and they go back, remember? We've been going through these BZA setbacks and all that. These lots are just a little bit bigger, but there are plenty of
So would
lots that are too
these be
small.
for, you would have to, somebody would have to have income and asset restrictions not to exceed?
Pardon?
Income and asset restricted?
Would it be based on income?
It would be, yes,
Yeah.
you're gonna have to, but you don't have to be impoverished to qualify. You don't have to be even low moderate income to qualify. That's the standard we use now for, we're building a house on Harris Street. You drive by there was a family living in a really bad old house. The federal government, through the state of Virginia, gave us money to tear that house down. It's been torn down, and the new house has been built back on the same location. But that is based on low moderate income. And for a family of 4, it's about $45,000 a year, okay? Which is not a real low, it's not poverty level, but that is the LMI standard that we built. This will have a higher standard so you could make more, because in the programs that we're working on Harris Street, for example, if you make more than the $45,000 a year with a 4-people family, you don't qualify.
That's not poverty level. 45,000 for a family
Poverty
of 4
level is
not
pretty
poverty
low,
level?
It is
you'd be
not poverty level.
surprised.
Poverty level-
Whoa.
Poverty level would be about half of that.
Oh my God.
And I will tell you,
That seems popular.
in the town of Blackstone, 74% of our population qualifies as low moderate income. What you call poverty, we call LMI. Almost 3 out of every 4 residents qualify.
So, I know, on the corner of Brunswick and 7th, so I live on 7th. Most of the houses on my street are $140,000, $150,000 houses. They just built a house on an empty lot on the corner of Brunswick and 7th. It's being listed at $396,000.
Yes, it is.
So,
And that's not
this
the
right
market.
here is a good idea because I can't afford $396,000 house, and I live on the same daggone street.
Exactly.
So, so I think this is a good idea.
Again, the market is building a
insane.
$300,000+ home, go down to the end of College Road, and down below where Tommy purchased a home, and they're sprouting up one behind the other. There could be additional 20 units beyond the existing subdivision that's already been approved back there. So that house is being built, the hotel / short stay apartment is being built. Nobody's really stepping in and building that $100,000 house on a market standard pricing. Now, there've been some houses that were built across from UMac,
Right.
and I don't know if anybody that lives in them,
I do.
but, huh?
I know people who live there.
Those things are $1,400 a month.
They are.
And I'm telling you, in Blackstone, $1,400 a month, 10 years ago when I started working, it was unheard of.
Right.
But what's going on with Fast C and what's going on is raising rents and it's raising, I mean, it's, capitalist way, that's what happens. But we wanna make sure that that slot, that we're not addressing with our LMI housing. We are building a lot of houses, renovating a lot of homes in Blackstone. It's that slot. You got the $300,000 home, you've got the $80,000, where are we in the middle? And, I'd like to build 2 of them on that property. It will get it below 10,000 square feet, which is the requirement, but it's half again bigger now.
So would one face Hurt and one would face Broad?
That's correct. One will face Hurt and one will face.
Oh, really?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
On
wait a
that
minute, let me see
property,
my,
if
oh,
it-
well, that makes sense.
If it's split,
Mhm.
will that give each property the 4-sided variance that they need for the houses to be apart?
No, I would go back to them and say, the 12 feet or whatever is required in the frontage. Now, when we build it, we're gonna have to build it 15% of whatever that frontage is, which would be, if they're 190 deep, then, what's that,
It's,
95?
95.
95 feet.
Yeah.
15% of 95, so they'd be almost 15 feet on either side.
On each side?
Mhm.
Oh, okay.
It still leaves plenty of room to put up. And it won't be modulars, it won't be manufactured housing, none of that, it'll be a stick-built product. that we put up.
I mean, I think it's awesome for our community, it just opens that can of worms with other people wanting to do that same thing.
But this one is not, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
No,
I
but
mean-
it's not,
Tell you,
And can it just be like, because this was a special request for a special project, and then, but, I guess it would have to come through the zoning
we
committee
still have to
anyhow?
come back to you guys and have a
Okay.
public hearing, but I didn't wanna do it and offend you guys and say, this is going south because then I need to look elsewhere. I wanted to gauge y'all's opinion on it, and if it's agreeable to go to public hearing, it may still not pass, I get it, but at least now I can notify the neighbors before we get everybody terribly
And
inflamed.
this would go,
you know.
this would go to the planning commission.
No, this is a variance, because
Okay.
the lots are smaller than are required,
Mhm.
and this would be a variance to the town's ordinance, which would typically require a 10,000 square foot lot in that neighborhood.
but if you, okay, you're saying one is gonna face Hurt and one is gonna face Broad?
Yes, ma'am. And this could only apply on a corner lot, because you have to have the road
Yeah.
frontage for both lots, or both parcels, so you couldn't do it on an interior lot in the middle of the block.
That wouldn't be so bad though, because, well, they're not back to back, but they're not right side by side, so
No,
you're not gonna
Hurt
feel the
big.
smallness of the
Hey,
lot.
Philip, that's not Hurt Street.
What is that street?
That
Plat says
is,
Hurt Street.
Huh?
The plat says Hurt Street.
But you talking about right there where the Pritchard girl live, right?
It's
Where
on
Dove Homes used to
Dove
own
home
the
where the
property.
house burned down.
Yeah,
There's
that's,
concrete
but that's
steps.
not Hurt Street.
It is Hurt Street.
It is? Up on Wilson Street, there's,
So this is just, he's just presenting this to y'all now. You're not voting tonight. It's something for y'all to think about. And would y'all recommend doing a public hearing for this for y'all?
Yes,
Okay.
I
the
would.
school teacher live on.
I went to look at that lot, yeah, no, I understand.
It's Rhodes, I think it's Epps Street. Robert Rhodes?
Why not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Epps.
So Philip,
That's what-
they are in agreement to advertise the
Move
public
forward,
hearing.
okay, I'm out of the way. Thank you for keeping us moving forward, Madam Clerk.
Yeah, that makes sense, getting
And
two
that's all
out
I
of
have
one.
for board zoning.
You know where Janice Pritchard live?
Yeah.
You remember
Yes,
when
they-
Donna got burned out there?
Not yet. We gotta adjourn this meeting and then go to the next one.
That's been like-
So y'all are in agreement to advertise for the
General
public hearing,
consensus, yes.
and then we'll
Let's
meet
see what the
again.
public has to say, and that's the purpose of the public hearing, and see if it raises everybody's hackles down there or not.
And the committee
But it's a
consensus.
vacant lot, you go down there, and there's a house that burned down.
Yeah.
Didn't Mr. Vaughn own that?
There was a Dove's home that owned it, and
You know when
believe it or
Donna
not,
got burned up? The quarrel guy. Donna,
Is
That's
that
who
the
lived
street
there.
that runs out where the chicken place and?
no, that's the street
That's
where
that street.
Janice Pritchard lived at.
You know where Mr. Pritchard Alley.
Oh, good, that,
Across.
okay,
That's the
okay,
street
okay, I
right
know
there.
where that is.
Right
If you know
across the street from Kick Lift.
I know where that is.
Yeah.
Kick lift, right across the street from Kick.
So they're not side by side, and they're not back to back, one's facing one way?
One would face Broad Street and one would have to face
Broad
Herb.
Street.
But they would be sharing a backyard, wouldn't they?
Huh?
They'd be sharing a backyard.
With side yard and a